Welcome to the Weekly Lead Podcast. I'm Becky Tirabassi, co-pastor of Viewpoint Church in Newport Beach, California. And this podcast is designed to reach people who have known me over the past few decades. I am looking for leaders, weekly leaders. And each week I bring a message from a sermon that will encourage you to lead by being loyal to God's Word, encouraging to others, advocates for the young generation, and devoted to prayer. Here we go. Join me now. By the way, my name's Becky Tirabassi. I'm married to the Dr. Roger Tirabassi. Welcome to Viewpoint Church. Last night, this is typical Roger Becky. You know, I look for something for us to do. I'm the social calendar person, and I'm like, we got to watch a movie. I guess we're going to watch a movie. I don't know, in 2 seconds, I find a movie about a former baseball player that is an alcoholic, but you don't know that right at the beginning, and he has pretty much no friends, and his daughter's really mad at him because he keeps messing up, and his friend becomes the kid in the grocery store, and the kid in the grocery store is always like, do you think I'm smart? And the baseball player's like, kind of ish, I don't know, and so he says, I have this book, and it was the Bible. And one of the coolest things is fearless, joyful grocery worker says to the baseball player with whom no one can really get close to, he says, oh, will you come to church with me? I need a ride. And the baseball player is like, no, no, no. And the next thing you know, the baseball player goes to church. And the next thing you know, the baseball player goes to the recovery group in the church. And we're watching this movie like, how did we just watch our lives? How did we just watch what happens in our church? How did we just find this movie? It was so wonderful. And when I think about our weekend together last weekend, we had 8 new believers, 8 people who said, I want to ask Jesus to come into my life. 2 weeks before, we had 13 baptisms on the beach. How many of you got baptized? Raise your hand. Oh, just stand up. Just stand up. Yeah, stand up, no. Stand up, and stay standing. Come on, stand up and stay standing. Okay. You know, our church is kind of a stand-up, sit-down church. If you've ever played Simon Says here, you know what I mean. Okay, you can sit down. We also do this if, like, you like something that the person said. You know, maybe you're not the big amen crowd, but you could do amen too, right, Priscilla? You can say amen. Or you can just stand up. But as I thought about our wonderful weekend last weekend, about the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, I thought especially for those of you who are following along at Viewpoint Church, whether you're online or in person, we're reading through the entire Bible in a year. And we do this every year here at Viewpoint. We're on about our 8th time through, right, Julie Sherburne? Give me a little shout out. You're going to be reading the last 3 chapters of the book of Luke this week. And you might think, you know, we've already just done the crucifixion and the resurrection. Now we're going to read 3. Well, so here's what I want to say. This is the perfect time to read this, because here's what Luke's saying. Let me tell you about my Jesus. He says, he makes a way where there ain't no way, and he rises up from an empty grave, and there ain't no sinner that he can't save. Let me tell you about my Jesus. So, pull out your outline. You have blanks, 5 blanks, and I'm going to give you the answers to those fill in the blanks from the last 3 chapters of the book of Luke, the gospel, which is the end. We're reading the end of Luke's gospel. He is the only gospel writer who has a sequel, which is the book of Acts. And you'll notice the last paragraph of the book of Luke is really the first chapter of the book of Acts. So it's kind of a teaser. It's kind of a 1-paragraph explosion that really explodes into your life in the beginning of June when we pick up where we leave off in Luke. But Luke is basically saying, let me tell you about my Jesus, who first of all is and was a servant. That's your first fill in the blank. Shortly after serving the Last Supper to the disciples, Luke 22 reminds us of the surprising, counterintuitive conversation Jesus has with the disciples. They begin to argue among themselves, it says, who would be the greatest among them? Jesus tells them, in this world, the kings and the great men lord it over their people, yet they're called friends of the people. But among you, it will be different. Those who are the greatest among you should take the lowest rank, and the leader should be like a servant. And who is more important, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? Well, the one who sits at the table, of course, but not here. Jesus continued, for I am among you as one who serves. You know, I love my little commentaries, and one of my favorites is Barclay's commentary. And in it, he gives the seating arrangements at a Jewish feast that you may or may not know. He said it was very definite. The table was arranged like a square with one side left open. At the top side of the square, in the center, sat the host. At the right sat the guest of first honor. On the left, the second guest. Second on the right, the third guest. Second on the left, the fourth guest, and so on around the table. The disciples had been quarreling about where they were to sit, for they had not yet rid themselves of the idea of an earthly kingdom. Jesus told them bluntly that the standards of this kingdom were not the standards of the world. Much like many of the words Jesus used to talk about himself to the religious elite, and especially to the disciples, a more spiritual or biblical meaning was often at play. In fact, by his own admission at the Last Supper, the night before he's crucified, we read in Luke's account the description of the scene. It says, when the time came, Jesus and the apostles sat down together at the table. I find, when you read slow or you read to preach, you find little nuggets. I've been very eager, Jesus said, to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins. We glaze over this. We consistently glaze over how many times he said he would suffer. How many times he said this, prophesied at least 5 times just in the book of Isaiah, the one who was chosen, he who was coming to save, would be not only a servant, but a suffering servant. Jesus knew the words of Isaiah very well. We know that because when the scroll was opened in the temple, he read from Isaiah. Isaiah 53 in particular, though, we read these words. He was despised and rejected by mankind. This is Isaiah, hundreds of years before Jesus Christ came to earth. He was a man of suffering and familiar with pain, and surely he took our pain and bore our suffering. Yet, we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our iniquities. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. This is Isaiah. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb. The Passover meal was the sacrifice of the lamb. It is Passover, the week Jesus is crucified. He was led like a lamb to slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, he did not open his mouth. He was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. And he was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence nor spoken any deceit from his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, after he had suffered, did you count how many times this word is in there? Perhaps as many times as he told the disciples before he was crucified, I will suffer. He will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Jesus knew he was a suffering servant. But most Jews, and especially the disciples, struggled with the suffering servant message he had been delivering. They wanted a king who wore a crown, not a servant who died on a cross. They wanted a conquering king, not a suffering servant. And Jesus clearly knew, and you know this is one of my favorite phrases, he knew the end from the beginning, and he had been telling them first and foremost, he was and is a servant. In his 3 years as a teacher among those who followed him, prayer then was one of the most significant disciplines of his life. First, he was a servant. Second, he was a prayer. You can put a little dash in between pray and That's your second. Fill in the blank. He was a servant and a prayer. He taught and modeled prayer from the beginning to the very end of his ministry. You'll read in Luke 22 this week how Jesus handles the most agonizing moment on earth, knowing what was coming. They leave the Passover meal together, and they went as usual to the Mount of Olives. He told them, pray that you will not give in to temptation. He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed. Father, if you're willing, and here's one of those nuggets, and here's another one of these words, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will done, not mine. It says in my little highlighted nugget, then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. What do we know from this? The purpose in prayer, one of the purposes in prayer is to strengthen you with help from heaven. Verse 44, he prayed more fervently. He prayed more fervently as it closes in on him. As the pressure gains, he doesn't give up. He prays more fervently. And he was such in agony that sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. At last he stood up only to find them asleep and exhausted, and he says, get up and pray. When in great agony, with the pain of rejection of what was to come, he asked his closest friends to pray with and for him. Raise your hand if, even and especially in this church, you've learned that lesson. Raise your hand if you've learned that to ask people to pray with you and ask people to pray for you has brought you courage and strength and hope. Yes, it's why we have this prayer meeting, right? We've learned in our church what Jesus was trying to teach. In prayer, you will find comfort. Perhaps that's why he taught the disciples so much about prayer. They did not know their future, but he did. In the New Testament, we read more about my Jesus, who was and is. You may not know this. If you've never read the Bible, you may not know. He is still praying. Hebrews 4:15-16 says, we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in every way that we are, yet was without sin. So what does it say? Run? Hide? Feel ashamed? No. Approach the throne of grace with confidence so that you may find mercy and grace to help you in your time of need. Hebrews 7, therefore, he's able once and forever to save those who come to God through him, and he lives forever to intercede with God on their, who's the there? Those he has saved, who have come to God through him. He lives forever to intercede for you. That's who he lives forever to what? He lives forever to what? To reign, to rule, to intercede with God on your behalf. And Romans 8:34 says this, Christ Jesus who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand. Oh, we just learned about the table. He's at the right hand of God and is also interceding for us. How many of you knew Scripture said that about the now? He intercedes for us right now. So think about it. When we don't pray about our needs, our fears, or our pains, when we don't ask for guidance, we just impulsively do what comes to mind. When we avoid or resist or forget to consult Jesus, we are missing his intercession on our behalf. We are missing his intercession on our behalf. Don't forget that. Don't forget that today. So let me tell you about my Jesus. Luke said he's a servant of prayer, a prophet. That's your third blank. He's a prophet. In yesterday's reading, in Luke 22, 7 through 10, you read the account of Jesus revealing to Peter and John just one more time by telling them in an incredibly prophetic way, meaning he tells them the end from the beginning. One day I'm going over. He tells them the end from the beginning, what they should do in advance. He tells them the whole story. This is what's kind of incredible. We go through the 4 Gospels when we read through the Change Your Life Daily Bible, which is simply a special edition of the one-year Bible. We go through Matthew, we go through Mark, we're in Luke now, and now we'll start at the very end of this week, coming up, John. It's the 4th Gospel writer. It's the same Gospel told by 4 people. This is the Gospel according to Luke, we are finishing. And so many times, Jesus tells them in advance what's going to happen. They just don't get it. They're not listening. They're not listening. It's plain English. Well, it wasn't English, but whatever. In Luke 22, it says this, now the festival of the unleavened bread arrived when the Passover lamb is sacrificed. So much double meaning here, right? Jesus sends Peter, John ahead, go prepare the Passover meal. We're going to eat together. Now, if you have nowhere to live and you haven't made reservations, what are you going to do? So they say, well, where do you want us to prepare it? As soon as you enter Jerusalem, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you. Follow him. At the house he enters, say to the owner, the teacher asks, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples? He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up. That's where you should prepare the meal. Scripture just clearly says in one verse, they went off to the city and found everything just as Jesus had said. And they prepared the Passover meal. Now, only a few hours later at the Passover meal, Jesus says to Peter, Simon, Simon. Again, little nugget right in here. Satan, Jesus says, Satan, so do you believe in Satan? Do you believe there is Satan? Jesus says to Peter, Satan has asked to sift each of you like wheat. This is Job-esque, isn't it? Satan has asked, but I have prayed for you. Have you noticed that in there? I've prayed for you, Simon, that your faith will not fail. And when you've turned back, the word turn back is repent. When you've turned back, strengthen your brothers. Don't hide. Don't feel ashamed. Don't run from me. Don't go rogue. Quickly strengthen your brothers. Lord, Peter said, I'm ready to go with you even to death. Jesus replied, Peter, the rooster will not crow today until you have denied me 3 times. The subheading above this passage in your Bible, your Holy Bible, says Jesus predicts Peter's denial. That's what a prophet does, but with incredible accuracy. Luke doesn't sugarcoat. He gives the 3 denials in rapid fire order. First, a servant asks, hey, weren't you with him? Peter's like, woman, I don't even know him. After someone else looks at him, hey, you must be one. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. An hour later, someone asks, this must be one of them because he's a Galilean. I can tell. It must be the way he dressed or something. Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately, the rooster crowed while he was still speaking. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Oh, suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind, and he cried and wept. It was one amazing moment after another when Jesus told the disciples what he was going to do before he did it. But it was altogether another level when Jesus began to tell about his own future. And in Luke 22, you're going to read this week at daybreak, the elders and the priests assemble, the teachers and the religious law, and they bring Jesus before the high council, and they say, tell us if you're the Messiah, this promised deliverer. Think of all the parables and short stories we've already read in the book of Luke about kings and kingdoms and leaders and owners and landowners. Think about all those parables. He says, I would tell you, but you would not even believe me. From now on, the Son of Man will be seated in the place of power at God's right hand. They all shouted, so you're claiming to be the Son of Man? He said, you say that I am. In other words, he's saying, who do you believe I am? In every generation and nation, individuals must settle the question. Doesn't matter how you were raised, doesn't matter what religion, what faith, no matter how old you are, do you believe that Jesus is God? It's interesting how many books like Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell, that's been reprised a number of times, talk about this prophet. But in a book called Science Speaks, this was from the 1950s, and even why Evidence That Demands a Verdict has been republished a few times because more archaeological evidence, more arguments against the resurrection. See, the resurrection was the key deal breaker. But in the Old Testament, Jesus was prophesied to be who he was, the way he came, and the way he died 61 times. And in Science Speaks by Peter Stoner, it says the probability of this could be mere coincidence, that it could be mere coincidence is ruled out. Calculated if even 8 of the prophecies of the 61 were fulfilled using the science of probability, the chance that one man might have fulfilled all 8 of them is 1 in 10 to the 17th. So how many of you are mathematicians? Raise your hand. Really? Go Jack. That's 17 zeros, am I right? Yeah. It's the big question. Do you believe? Do you believe? That's basically what Jesus was saying. I am God. Do you believe? Just say the word, I believe, if you do believe. I believe. I hope you've been encouraged by this message, and I hope you join me every week for the Weekly Lead podcast. Meanwhile, you can follow me daily on Instagram at Becky Tirabassi and find the link in the bio with everything you need to become a weekly leader.